The galaxy trembled with laughter when the alien empire first set its sights on Earth. An ancient, proud civilization, they had conquered countless worlds, leaving nothing but ashes and memories in their wake. They had destroyed entire species, turned planets to dust, and reshaped entire star systems to suit their imperial ambitions. And when they finally encountered the humans, they believed they had found their next conquest, a weak, primitive species barely capable of defending their fragile homeworld. To them, humanity was a joke, a mere blip in the grand design of the cosmos. But they underestimated one thing. One woman. General Anya Kessler stood at the head of Earth's defense forces, her fingers clenched around a holographic map of the galaxy. She wasn't the strongest, the most gifted, or the most technologically advanced. But she was human. And humanity, when pushed to the brink, did what no other species could do: survive. The Empire's scouts had already made their move, decimating Earth's fleet in a series of lightning-fast strikes. The humans, though outmatched in technology and numbers, had managed to scramble a small resistance, but it seemed futile. Yet, when Kessler stood before the War Council, her voice was unwavering. "You want war? We'll give you war," she declared, the words burning with defiance. No one in the room had expected such boldness, especially after the recent losses. Yet in her eyes burned a fire no alien force could douse. The Empire was used to their enemies falling before them. But Kessler's declaration set the stage for a different kind of fight. Her words were not just a challenge, they were a promise. Armed with a fleet cobbled together from the remnants of Earth's military, Kessler and her warriors began to harness every ounce of human ingenuity and desperation. The Empire may have laughed at humanity's primitive technologies, but they didn't understand one crucial thing: humanity had an unbreakable will to survive. And when pushed too far, humans didn't just fight back, they adapted. They innovated. They won. As Kessler rallied her ragtag fleet, each member of her crew, from engineers to elite soldiers, knew what was at stake. The survival of their species hung in the balance. They were outgunned, outnumbered, and outmatched in every conceivable way. But they had something the Empire never counted on: the human spirit. Now, the battle lines were drawn. The Empire, still believing victory was certain, failed to recognize the power of a species fighting for its existence. And as Kessler's forces prepared to make their final stand, the question remained: could they defy the odds, or would Earth fall to the might of the Empire? A fleet of alien warships hovered above Earth's atmosphere, ready to strike the killing blow. But somewhere in the depths of space, Kessler and her crew were preparing for a counterattack, one that would shake the very foundation of the Empire. And as the clock ticked down to zero, Kessler whispered to herself, "This is just the beginning." The stage was set, the tension palpable. But as the first shot was fired, one question lingered: would humanity rise to the challenge? Or would this be their final hour? General Kessler's hands trembled ever so slightly as she stared out the viewport of the command ship. Earth, her home, was a small speck against the vastness of space, and the alien warships above were like a swarm of locusts ready to consume it. The loss of so many ships, so many lives, had left the resistance fragile. But there was something in Kessler's heart, something that had never been extinguished: hope. The humans had been underestimated, again and again, by the Empire. The Empire's arrogance was its greatest weakness, and Kessler knew this all too well. While they mocked humanity for its lack of advanced technology, they failed to understand what drove humans to fight. The will to protect, to fight for one another. For survival, those were things no alien fleet could replicate. The briefing room was filled with hushed murmurs, the faces of the remaining officers drawn and worn from the constant pressure. In front of Kessler stood her most trusted commander, Colonel Ramirez, his dark eyes studying the tactical screen that hovered before them. "General, we've got one shot at this," he said, his voice steady but laced with concern. "Our fleet is small, our resources even smaller. If we fail, we're done." Kessler nodded, her gaze drifting to the star map. The Empire's armada loomed in orbit, but their overconfidence had made them predictable. They believed Earth's resistance was crumbling, but they didn't see the secret Kessler had kept from them all: humanity's greatest asset wasn't technology. It was the ability to think, to adapt, to strike when the enemy least expected it. "We've been playing defense long enough," Kessler said, her voice cutting through the tension in the room. "Now we hit them where it hurts." She had already placed a plan in motion, a plan that would require every ounce of courage, ingenuity, and sacrifice. The fleet was preparing to launch a counteroffensive, but this time, they wouldn't be fighting just with weapons, they would fight with a trap. A trap built from Earth's technology, the same technology the Empire thought was beneath them. Ramirez frowned as the map updated with the fleet's position. "You're betting everything on this, General. If they catch on before we execute." "I know," Kessler interrupted, locking eyes with him. "But we have no choice. If we don't do this now, there won't be an Earth left to defend." As the words hung in the air, Kessler's mind flashed back to the beginning of the war. Earth had barely put up a fight, and yet, when the Empire had reached out, it had been humanity's resilience, not its weaponry, that had kept them in the fight. They had been forced to improvise, adapt, and innovate, using everything they had left to build a defense that the Empire never saw coming. The irony wasn't lost on her. Humanity had been forced into a corner, and it was there, at the edge of extinction, that they thrived. Outside, the alien ships shifted in their formation. It wouldn't be long before they launched their final strike, and Kessler had no intention of being caught off guard. She turned back to Ramirez, her face set in determination. "Prepare the fighters. Make sure the civilians are evacuated to the underground bunkers. This is it." Ramirez nodded and left the room. Kessler stood by the viewport, her hands resting on the cold metal. Her mind raced with the plan, but doubt still gnawed at her. Was this enough? Could the trap truly work? Suddenly, an alarm blared, breaking her thoughts. She spun around, eyes wide. The tactical screen flashed red. Multiple ships, unidentified, were emerging from hyperspace. There was no time left. Kessler's pulse quickened as she realized the Empire had made its move. They were coming. She sprinted toward the command center, a cold sense of urgency flooding her veins. "Prepare for launch," she barked to her officers. "We don't have much time. Move out now." The hum of the engines reverberated through the hull of the ship, and Kessler's heart raced. She had one chance to make this work. One chance to prove that humanity wasn't to be underestimated. As the fleet moved into position, Kessler's fingers hovered over the launch controls, every part of her telling her to hesitate, to think, to double-check the plan. But there was no time for doubt. The Empire's ships were almost upon them. She slammed her hand down on the button, and the first wave of fighters shot off into the stars. But just as they did, the tactical screen blinked again. A new signal had appeared in unfamiliar code. A message. From the Empire? Kessler's breath caught in her throat as she read the message aloud, the words echoing in the silence of the command deck. "This is not over, General. The Empire has already won." The message from the Empire hung in the air, a cruel reminder of their dominance. "This is not over, General. The Empire has already won." Kessler's fingers trembled, a tight knot forming in her chest. She stared at the words flashing on the screen, unable to shake the feeling of being caught in a trap she hadn't seen coming. The Empire's arrogance had always been their greatest flaw, but now it seemed like they had calculated everything, even her every move. Her mind raced as the ship's command center filled with the hurried voices of her officers. The fighters had already been deployed, but something felt wrong. The usual hum of the engines, the comforting thrum of Earth's last-ditch resistance, felt too quiet now. The plan she'd spent so much time perfecting was suddenly uncertain. Could they really have predicted this? Colonel Ramirez entered the command center, his expression grave. "General, we're picking up strange readings. The Empire. They've deployed stealth ships. They're hiding in the asteroid belt. They knew we'd bait them with the fighters." Kessler clenched her jaw, the weight of it all pressing down on her. She had been so sure of their plan, so certain that humanity could outthink the Empire with their unpredictability. But now, with stealth ships lurking in the shadows, their carefully laid plans seemed like nothing more than a desperate gamble. "We're out of time," Ramirez added, glancing at the tactical screen. "They've already locked onto our positions." They'll wipe us out if we stay in the open. We need to get the fighters back, and we need to regroup, General. Kessler's gaze hardened. No. We move forward. We can't let them think they have us. We'll push them into a corner. The decision burned her throat as she said it, but there was no other option. Retreat was never an option. Not now, not when humanity's future was on the line. As Ramirez turned to issue the orders, Kessler couldn't help but feel the weight of the impending strike. The Empire had underestimated her once, but the question now was, could she still turn the tide? Her mind flashed to the faces of the soldiers who had fought beside her, the officers who had pledged their loyalty to Earth. She owed them more than this. She owed them victory. Meanwhile, across the battlefield, another story was unfolding. On one of the fighter ships that had been launched, Lieutenant Sarah Brooks, one of Kessler's most trusted pilots, scanned the horizon from the cockpit. She was used to the chaos of battle, but today the atmosphere felt different. The sense of urgency was palpable, but there was something else, something in the air that told her they were being watched. She tried to shake off the feeling, focusing on the mission at hand. The fighter's engine roared as she veered toward the designated target area, her heart pounding. The plan was simple: distract the Empire long enough to give Kessler's fleet the upper hand. But as she scanned the space ahead, something caught her eye. A flash too fast to be a passing comet, too precise to be a stray asteroid. She barely had time to react before the ship shuddered violently, an explosion ringing in her ears. Her screen went dark, and the fighter went into freefall, spiraling toward the black expanse of space. Mayday? Mayday! Sarah's voice echoed over the comms, but there was no answer. The interference from the Empire's stealth ships was too strong. As the fighter plummeted toward the debris field, she managed to regain control, narrowly avoiding collision with the scattered remnants of broken ships. But her heart sank as she saw the truth of their situation. They were surrounded, and the Empire had outsmarted them. Back on the command ship, Kessler's worst fears were being realized. The stealth ships were now fully in play, and the Empire's forces had begun closing in on Earth's remaining fighters. Kessler knew that unless they could find a way to neutralize the Empire's technological advantage, the battle would be lost. But how? General, one of the officers interrupted her thoughts. There's a signal coming from the asteroid belt. It's encrypted, but it's human. The words hung in the air, heavy with possibility. A secret ally? Or was it a trap? Kessler's eyes narrowed. This could be the break they needed, or it could be the final blow. Put it through, she commanded. The transmission crackled to life, and the voice that came through was one Kessler hadn't heard in years. General Kessler, it's Commander Hawkins. We've got a problem. Kessler's pulse quickened. Hawkins had been one of the few to escape the initial assault on Earth's fleet. If anyone could offer an answer to the growing crisis, it was him. But his voice was strained, desperate. They're not alone. The Empire. They've made an alliance. Kessler's heart skipped a beat. An alliance? With who? Before Hawkins could continue, the transmission cut out. The screen flickered, and a deep sense of dread filled the command center. Someone was playing a far longer game than she had anticipated, and Kessler had just stumbled into a web that she may never be able to escape from. The countdown had begun, and as the first of the Empire's ships advanced, the stakes had changed. Now, it wasn't just Earth that was at risk, it was the entire galaxy. The air on the command ship had grown thick with tension. Kessler stood before the viewport, her gaze fixed on the incoming fleet. The Empire's ships were now visible, massive and looming, like a gathering storm. The alliance Hawkins had spoken of was still a mystery, but the mere suggestion of it was enough to send a chill down her spine. She had never anticipated that the Empire's strategy would involve more than just overwhelming force. This was something different, something far more dangerous. Colonel Ramirez stood beside her, his expression dark. General, we don't have much time. If the Empire has reinforcements, if they've joined forces with someone, this could be the end. His voice was steady, but there was fear behind it. Fear Kessler had learned to recognize in the faces of her soldiers. It was the same fear they had felt when Earth's cities first burned. the same fear she had fought to suppress ever since. But now it threatened to undo everything they had built. Kessler gripped the edge of the console, trying to steady her thoughts. There had to be a way out. There always was. But time was running out. The Empire's ships were drawing closer, and every second she hesitated was another second they had to finish what they'd started. She looked back at the screen, her mind working through every possible option. If they couldn't outfight them, maybe they could outsmart them. That's what humanity had always done best. "Get me Commander Hawkins again," she ordered. "We need to know who the Empire is working with." The officer at the communications console nodded, hands flying over the controls. But the minutes stretched on without any word from Hawkins. The static buzzed louder, mocking them. "We're being jammed," the officer said, his voice tinged with disbelief. "The Empire's somehow blocking all incoming signals. We can't reach anyone out there." Kessler cursed under her breath. The walls were closing in, and she had no answers. The battle was rapidly approaching its breaking point, and they were no longer in control. Meanwhile, on the edge of the battlefield, Lieutenant Brooks was still clinging to life. Her fighter had been crippled, but somehow she had managed to bring it to a dead stop among the debris. Her heart pounded in her chest, every instinct telling her to get out of the ship before it was too late. But there was nowhere to go. The Empire's ships had surrounded the debris field. There was no way to run, and every movement felt like a death sentence. She glanced at her controls, her hands shaking as she tried to force a communication link through. Come on," she muttered, slamming her fist against the console. The ship groaned in protest. She was out of time, out of options. But then, the screen flickered barely, but enough to give her hope. A brief flash of static. A voice, distorted, came through the speaker. "Brooks. Do you copy?" Her heart leapt. "I hear you. Who is this?" The voice crackled again. "This is Commander Hawkins. Get to the asteroid cluster. We've got a window." Brooks didn't hesitate. She keyed in the coordinates Hawkins had given her and ignited the damaged engines. It was a long shot, but it was the only chance she had. As the fighter limped toward the coordinates, she couldn't help but wonder what kind of forces Hawkins had at his disposal. He'd been missing for weeks. Why now? Why in the middle of the battle? Back at the command ship, Kessler was starting to feel the weight of her decisions. "We need to act, General," Ramirez said again, his voice urgent. "We can't just wait for Hawkins' intel. We need to hit them now, or they'll wipe us off the map." Kessler turned away from the viewport, locking eyes with her officers. "No. We wait. We need that intel." Every fiber of her being screamed that they couldn't rush this. If they did, the cost would be too great. But every second they wasted meant the Empire got closer to their final strike. Then, as if on cue, the comms officer's voice rang out. "General, we've got a new contact." "It's Brooks. She's heading into the asteroid cluster. She says Hawkins is there." Kessler's pulse quickened. "Is she alone?" "We can't be sure yet, Mom, but she's close." Kessler nodded, mind racing. If Hawkins was there, they might have a fighting chance. But there was another problem, a problem she wasn't ready to face. If Hawkins had truly returned, if he had a fleet at his back, what did that mean for the Empire's mysterious new allies? Could the tide of the war really be turning? The Empire's ships were closing in, the moment of truth rapidly approaching. Kessler stood in the center of the command deck, feeling the weight of the galaxy pressing down on her shoulders. They could fight or they could die. But no matter what happened next, humanity's fate was hanging in the balance. Every heartbeat brought them closer to the brink. Just as the first shot from the Empire's fleet rang out, the screen flickered again. And for the briefest moment, Kessler saw an enormous warship rising from behind the asteroid belt, its dark silhouette cutting through the stars. The alliance was real. But was it enough? And more importantly, who stood behind it? Before she could make the call, the ship's sensors screamed a warning. The Empire had launched a full assault. And this time, they weren't holding back. The battlefield erupted in a blaze of energy as the Empire's assault came crashing down. Kessler gripped the edge of her console, her breath coming in shallow gasps. The warship that had emerged from the asteroid field loomed larger now, a symbol of humanity's last stand. Hawkins had made good on his word. His fleet, a ragtag group of ships cobbled together from the remnants of Earth's former military, had arrived just in time to make a difference. But the Empire wasn't giving up without a fight. Kessler's mind raced. The odds were still stacked against them, and the Empire's firepower was overwhelming. But there was something in Hawkins' fleet that was different, a glimmer of hope, a spark of human ingenuity that no alien force could predict. She had seen it before, in the face of overwhelming adversity. Humanity had an uncanny ability to adapt, to survive, to turn the tide when all seemed lost. "Ready the counterattack," she ordered, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. "We need to hit them now, while they're still reeling from the surprise." Ramirez nodded, and within moments the fleet was in motion. The smaller ships darted in and out of the Empire's larger formations, using the asteroid field for cover, striking quickly before retreating to safety. Kessler watched, heart pounding, as the human forces used their agility and resourcefulness to exploit weaknesses in the Empire's formation. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Brooks was making her way toward the heart of the conflict, her damaged fighter cutting through space like a wounded animal. She knew that the next few minutes would determine everything. Either she would get through to Hawkins and secure the Alliance's victory, or she would be just another casualty in a war humanity couldn't afford to lose. "Come on, Brooks," she muttered to herself, pushing the fighter harder. The ships around her exploded in brilliant flashes, but she kept her focus on the prize ahead. Hawkins' flagship was within reach. She could feel the weight of humanity's hopes pressing on her as she closed in. On the command ship, Kessler's eyes never left the screen. The Empire's ships were beginning to falter, their previously confident maneuvers showing signs of weakness. Hawkins' fleet was cutting a path through the oncoming fire, outmaneuvering the Empire's heavy vessels with astonishing precision. But the fight wasn't over. The real test was coming. Suddenly, a transmission came through. It was Hawkins. His voice crackled over the comms, and Kessler felt a surge of relief. "General, it's now or never. We've got them on the ropes. Push them back, and we'll finish this together." The words rang in Kessler's ears. "We'll finish this together." She hadn't heard those words in so long, and for the first time since the war began, she believed them. They had a chance. No, they had more than that. They had the will to win. With a sharp exhale, Kessler issued the final command. "All units, final push. We fight until the last ship falls." The human fleet surged forward, pushing the Empire back. The asteroid field became a blur of fire and debris as both sides clashed in a chaotic ballet of destruction. But humanity's tenacity and adaptability proved too much for the Empire. Slowly, the Empire's ships began to retreat, their once imposing formations breaking apart under the relentless onslaught. As the battle came to a close, Kessler stood silently, watching the final remnants of the Empire's fleet disappear into the void. Victory! Against all odds, humanity had triumphed. The war was over. But as Kessler allowed herself a moment of relief, she couldn't shake the feeling that this victory was only the beginning. The Empire might have been defeated, but their mysterious allies, those who had stood by them, remained a looming threat. There was more to the universe than they had yet seen, and while they had won the battle, the war was far from over. For now, though, humanity had proved something important. Against all expectations, against the overwhelming might of the Empire, they had not only survived, they had won. And that, in the end, was what mattered most. Kessler looked out into the stars, knowing the road ahead would be long, but for the first time, she felt a glimmer of hope. Humanity's future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: they would fight, and they would always find a way to win.